Hello, and welcome to Night Clerk Radio, episode 108. It will go down in history as the first episode recorded in my new, currently not acoustically treated, reverby office. Just voice bit booping off every wall. Mm-hmm. It'll no doubt drive me crazy while editing.
Oh, yeah.
Just completed the big move, which is why we're doing new music early this month, because it's easy to just pick out two good albums and listen to them and talk about them.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's interesting because I thought we sort of ended up in the same situation as our last new music episode, or maybe two ago. I think last one, though, where I made the point in the intro that one album is comfort food, which is yours again, and another album is me trying to reevaluate past tastes, I guess. Yeah. So I'm going to talk about that for a second. So the two albums are, your album is Before the Forest by FM Forest off of Villain. Mm-hmm. And I am doing WWW by Christ. And Christ is like such a plunderphonics master, but we haven't really talked about him very much. Mm-hmm. Really just one time, which is, I think, like the second or third Patreon bonus episode. So 4.5 years ago, depending on our recording schedule at the time. And I wanted to get back into this because I had been listening to a lot of releases since then and really, really liking them. And I'd kind of forgotten what I said back then, which is like kind of this now silly remark about what is acceptable nostalgia in vaporwave. Mm-hmm. Because I was like, oh, this is really well made. It's really well put together. It was a little glitchier than I was used to at the time for vaporwave, even though I like glitch in industrial and other contexts. And then like it had more aught samples, more like modern YouTube meme samples. And I was just like, because I fucking love this WWW album, this new album. Yeah. I thought it was great. I was like, man, what I expect out of vaporwave or like those tastes have changed so much in just 4 years of like having to sit down and actually listen to and engage with the genre. So I don't know, like these just little shifts are interesting. It's not just like taste changing, which does happen over time. We've talked about it's like future funk, like interests come and go. And
well, I think it's also the artists themselves changing too. Like the scene is changing. Like I think
a little bit.
Yeah. So I think like the type of music production styles used kind of are changing a bit, or at least like what was good plunderphonics, back 10 years ago is not the kind of plunderphonics that people want to do today.
I think there's that. I think for me, it's like a broader re-education about like the breadth of what vaporwave can be, instead of being like more of a neophyte and having this very narrow, like it's 80s nostalgia and it's blah, 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 blah. And there's a little bit of 90s and just not really knowing what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And just seeing all these artists, Christ and others, doing so much with aughts nostalgia, meme nostalgia, just more modern topics. I don't have a point. I'm not trying to like pat myself on the back for being so open-minded, but I've just been really digging his last few albums. And it's just thinking about silly.
Well, it's also like the nostalgia cycle is shifting, right? Like we're now nostalgic about the fucking early war on Terra, the 2000s, and like we'll get into more in the album, but like I think it's 80s nostalgia is so weird now. It's become its own bespoke thing. Like it's an alien thing that's just like, oh yeah, the 80s as depicted in synthwave, which is different than the actual 80s, like, but people are now nostalgic for the early 2000s in those simpler times.
It could be.
Yeah.
Yeah. I get all that. I don't disagree. I just think like re-listening to Fraser Wave, which I think is the album we talked about in our bonus episode. And then like No Lives Matter. And then he put out 10 Years Later, which was like a compilation of like 2013 through 2023.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just enjoying coming around to stuff that I had to reevaluate broad perceptions on. And that's why it's so important to like revisit stuff and not try to close out of things too much.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. My tastes have changed, have shifted as well. And I've talked about that in other episodes, but yeah, it's really cool to see. I'm not the only one that's happening to. Yeah.
Yeah. Or like a reevaluation of certain aspects. So like, you've come around on like Lux Elite, right? Is someone who maybe you didn't get into, exactly, but now you appreciate what they do now.
Yeah.
So it's always be willing to listen to stuff again.
Yeah. And also like keep following an artist, even if like one album bounced off of you. I think a lot of artists in the vaporwave scene and everything I think they tend towards more experimentation and trying new things and styles than like musicians in other genres. I don't know. Maybe that's just my perception, but yeah, there's a lot of experimentation. Lux Elite's early albums sound pretty different, I think, in some ways to their later albums.
Sure.
And I think that's a pretty common thing for the artist to change or to try new things.
Yeah, or just it's so easy to move on if you don't like something is like a real problem. You have that real like, oh God, I'm not on apps anymore. Whichever direction is the bad swipe. Left? Is left the bad swipe? Sorry, goddamn. That's like the oldest man question I've ever asked. But it's so easy. Yeah. It's so easy to just move on because there's a trillion other things. But like
that's true.
That's the other problem.
Yeah.
So you gotta be willing to stick with stuff and really see if you like it and not be so like bullheaded, like bad gut responses to stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. That's just something these albums made me think about. I don't really have a larger point other than coming up on 5 years of doing this. I guess it's a little retrospective of I used to be even worse at this than I am now.
I mean, it's also like if one thing I really do respect a lot of musicians who are taking, seeing all these musicians taking older technologies, older styles of making music and creating new compositions with them, new music, like my album and like the whole dungeon synth genre. And seeing that really start to blossom, or like for me, seeing as I explored and seeing more, or hearing more of this really cool music, taking stuff that's anachronistic in a lot of ways, but embracing the anachronisms. That's something I wasn't as much into back then. So it's quite interesting. Like I wouldn't have listened. I don't think I would have become a Dungeon Synth fan if I had not been doing the show and exposing myself to so much new music, because it took a while to find like Dungeon Synth that really clicked with me, and the related genres, like naturewave, which we'll talk about in a minute.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's enough reminiscing about the near past. Let's get into some new music.
Is a sample from track 1, The Journal, from Before the Forest, an album by FM Forest, a motherboard or a villain, an artist on the villain label or the motherboard label. I don't know. It's complicated, but it's naturewave. It's that subgenre of vaporwave that's about nature. This is a short album. FM Forest has done a couple other albums actually in the last year with a very similar motif of taking a synthesizer into a forest and just seeing what works. It's an appropriate album, I think, for summer. Everything is sprouting, everything is thriving in nature, I think. And yeah, I quite like this album. It's very, what I like about naturewave is like, what is the music of the forest? And you would think most people would use like some form of classical music and like instruments made from wood and that kind of thing. But naturewave is like, no, there's no music with the forest. It's our cultural conception of the forest, and the music that is about our cultural conception of the forest is through nature documentaries, through, educational media. And that's almost always like synthesizer music. It's always almost like, and I think it sort of draws heavily on that. And these sort of pastoral themes rendered in high technology through synthesizers with some real instruments. You know, there's a guitar and there's samples, but like I really like this juxtaposition of taking, you know, the most high tech of instruments in general with the most primordial of themes, you know, the beauty and splendor of the forest. So yeah, it's a nice. I've actually been working on a naturewave mix on and off.
Oh, nice.
And I've been. This will definitely be. I'll grab a couple tracks for that. But yeah, this came out I think in May 31st. I actually discovered right after our last new episode on music. It's like, oh dang, I could have done this. But yeah, I quite like it. It's, you know, it's not plunderphonics. It's original music, but like it's evocative of these older styles of music used to talk about nature.
Yeah, I really like this. The May album is funny because we're both kind of breaking the rules with doing slightly older albums by a month for our July new music. But hey, just the way it worked out. You have to deal with it. Yeah, I really like this album. I really like FM Forest. I have not listened to, I think, their first album under that name, Universe. But I did listen to Tomorrow's Winter because like Villain/Motherboard is one of those labels I like to pay attention to. How can you argue with Blade Wave? it's and Lebowski Wave, which I got my Lebowski Wave vinyl. Everyone said it was an April Fool's joke. I got it. It's a thing. It's real.
Hell yeah.
But Tomorrow's Winter was cool, but more mellow, which makes sense because it was a fall release, if I remember right. It was like October, November release. I really liked it. I think it's a lot of the same, pulls from a lot of the same inspirations in terms of like educational music. I always think of like BBC, like 70s BBC music.
Yes.
But this album, I don't know if it's going into summer. It's telling a different story, different season, different moods. It has more faster tracks. And they're not really faster in terms of like tempo, but they have more active synths.
Yeah.
I kind of call them like discovery synths whenever you have these like little mysterious arpeggiators kind of going and like they're a little more rapid in terms of moving through their sequence. Like the track 9, the fluxomoratory reading is like a lot of like pulsing synth and arpeggiators and speeds up and speeds up and speeds up until it just becomes tone. You know, it's so fast that your ear just hears it as a solid tone, which I've talked about before. A special effect track 7 is the same way, where I thought it had like more active dissonance going on and like other synth pads, but it didn't feel like a higher tempo. It didn't feel like the tempo was any faster, just that the track itself was busier.
Yeah, like this is, you know, ambient music, but it's not like just pure soundscapes, right? Yeah, there's like structure and melody and, you know, arpeggios. Like I really like track 7 too, because it really this album's very good at evoking the sense of wonder of like, look how fucking glorious nature is. But track 7, it kind of unravels a little bit. It gets a little weird and like very like, well, maybe things aren't going so great. And then really goes to like really fucking ham towards the end. In fact, why don't we do a sample of that? So yeah, there's a real interesting, like all the tracks make sense for this theme, but like there's a lot of variety where, you know, a lot of these kind of nature wave or like type albums are very ambient and very like one track just bleeds into the other, but there's a lot of differentiation in what's going on. There's a lot of, again, I think that kind of experimentation of like what works. I think I read that FM Forest said these are tracks that I made before I made my first album, or like,
oh, interesting,
they didn't fit into the album, or like before and after the first album. And so like I worked, you know, to make it into an album. So these are sort of like B-sides or outtakes. So that might explain why there's that variation in tracks. Like, you know, track 4 is like just a kind of like a lo-fi, like pleasant guitar Yeah. Just kind of like, just vibing to the
swimming in the lake.
Yeah.
Well, Sister Lake. But a little acoustic solo folk. Yeah. And that little bit of storytelling is interesting because this does have a shortish story for liner notes about like, I woke up on a beach and I started wandering and I came across this strange object and all these memories and this sort of mystical experience. And you feel that because like it starts off with all this, like, I call it drippy, but like this wide, ethereal, airy synth soundscape.
Oh, yeah.
And then it gets like a little more dissonant and like tinny in the second one, which is mountain radiation. And then you go through more of like mysterious or exploratory synths are how I always think of them. Like that's like I can't explain it. It's like some weird, not quite synesthesia, but when I hear that kind of, the term for it is actually, and it's one that has become kind of like disco, like a dirty word in some sense. But like new age.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
New age music, which is like actually a lot of really interesting ambient soundscape stuff like this.
Yeah.
That's what I thought. But then, there's this Mist on Elijah Hill, which is actually like a long track for the album. A lot of these tracks are not terribly long, but this one's like 6 minutes. And it sees like all this like string melody. It's pretty peaceful. It's like sweeping and windy.
Like wind chimes.
Sort of, yeah, just kind of languid. It just hangs out there and you really enjoy it. And then, like you said, track 7 and on is just like this shift as you make this discovery, you find this artifact, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know. I always like when there's like even a hint of like a little bit of storytelling in music that's like, being like an instrumental concept album. You don't just need lyrics to tell you what's happening.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, it's quite good. Like Mountain Radiation, I felt almost, track 2 almost veered into Dungeon Synth territory.
Yeah.
And I'm not mad. Like it's fine. Like it's great. It's but I do agree with the storytelling. Yeah, there is this subtle shift throughout the album as we get more cosmic later on. I'm very curious. Did you understand I didn't like have it super cranked up to understand. Like there's some whispered like vocals or samples at the end of the album, at the end of track 12, end of season. And I thought that was a really nice coda, a way to end the album is have like someone whispering to you, but like you kind of.
No, I didn't. Yeah, I wasn't able to make it out.
Very, it's a very nice touch, but and I kind of like having a bit of mystery, but I'm glad there was only like one bit of sampled vocals in there whispering. If that would have gotten really irritating if there's a lot of like ASMR whispering throughout the album.
Just running it through my isolator. Just give me the voices.
Give me the voices. I want to hear what they're saying. Yeah.
But I agree. Like End of Season is an awesome end track. I loved all those like deep, I guess I'll say chimes, but some sort of like deep percussive, but toned percussive element throughout, like lots of little synth leads. I actually think my favorite track was probably track 10, Deep Discovery.
Oh, yeah.
I just really liked like kind of that repeated muffled drum ostinato and then all these other little synth leads coming in and out throughout kind of growing up. I just thought it was like, I don't know, it just really, really hit me. Like if you think about tracks that can't really explain why, but if you're just listening to it for the 4th time on the side while you're working and that track, you're like, oh man, I love this track.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That was kind of one for me.
Yeah. I think I'll put that in my mix. Yeah. I'm also a big fan of just anything with a little like vibrato or warbling, that little unsteadiness is like, yes. I don't know. Something about my brain just likes that part. So yeah, no, it's a very warm album overall too. It's a very, some of these naturewave albums get kind of threatening or like, oh, yeah, don't forget nature's scary, or like a little ominous. But this is like, no, it's just the beauty of nature. Just enjoy it on a nice warm summer day under the shade of the tree. But yeah, it's only like a little over half an hour as an album, which is nice because some of these albums kind of overstay their welcome or they run out of ideas. But they just keep repeating like the same ideas. Like, all right, I get it. But this one is just full of interesting musical ideas and great execution. So I'm going to have to listen to all of FM Forest's work so far. Because I've only listened to a couple of other albums. I think I did listen to Universe, but I missed Tomorrow's Winners. So yeah.
It's really good. Yeah.
Nice.
Check them out.
Yeah.
is a bit from track 3, Jimmy, off our second album, WWW by Christ. And I hope, we actually just say WWW. There's not some like cool pronunciation that you're actually supposed to be, if you know what you're talking about. That's what you say. But yeah, this is a May of this year release from Christ. And it is a masterful example of like just classic plunderphonics, I guess. I don't know. But with more modern samples, a lot of it's like aughts pop. There's some stuff from the 90s and before. But yeah, it's this concept album about I'm going to take it about either joining the military or being drafted, which is interesting because it's described as, if I understand the liner notes right, worked on from March of 2022 through January of 2024. So I don't know if it's in response to Ukraine or just other sort of lingering thoughts, but it's sort of interesting with like the recent revamped discussion around drafting and selective service in the U.S.
There's that movie Civil War that just came out.
Yeah. But the time frame though is that it's from kind of the last 2 years or so.
It's interesting because what I was thinking of is because of the era of which he was taking all these samples that he was talking about the war on terror. And
yeah, that's the other obvious thing is like 20 years of shipping people over to Iraq and Afghanistan and the cover art is a little fox soldier. But garbed out in US, like a US kit. But man, I love this album. It's so all over the place in like the best way.
Yeah.
The first half, especially because the titles clearly lead up to somebody, joining the military, right? Because there's Server, I don't know, hanging out on the internet, Servers, doom scrolling, Jimmy, Head Scraped, and then Boot Camp.
Yep.
It's like the first 5 tracks. And there's a little bit of back and forth there. Like Server is very like classic vaporwave. There's this, low resonant piano, ominous looped vocals.
Yeah, pitch shifted.
Yeah, the pitch shifted, slowed down, just kind of 1 or 2 lines repeated. And then it just kicks into Doom Scroller, which is like this grimy, distorted drum pattern. I think there's like little 808s in there. And then all this instrumentation, but there's I'm Falling looped over and over that. And then back into Jimmy, which is our sample, which is like thumpy bass, but a little more hazy, a little more airy. There's piano, a lot of auxiliary percussion. And then Head Scraped itself is kind of half and half, with the first half being more dissonant. There's a lot of like competing elements, but they do resolve into kind of like piano and drums, basically.
Yeah, I really like this album too, because this is, when Negative Land came up with the idea of, and people were writing about plunderphonics as a concept back in the 80s. This is the kind of thing they were talking about, not just taking like one sample and like changing it, like doing 10 minutes of work to it and calling it your own, but like taking these sourced samples and transforming them and merging them and mixing them together to create something entirely new that doesn't sound like any one of the elements. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And
that's right.
Yeah. And I think this is what this album is doing in spades. It's also like I love mashups and I love like the Mouth, trilogy of albums, but like those are all comedic, and this is not like a comedic album.
No, I don't think so. At least I didn't take it as one. I just don't think that's the intent at all.
Yeah. And so it's nice to see these kind of techniques being used something other than be like, haha, I'm making silly, funny song. It's an earworm too. But like, it is a wild journey. It is very chaotic and shifting pretty on a fast basis. Like every track, you don't know what to expect, what the next track is going to be like.
Also, like really interesting set of samples. I think if you look at the YouTube version of this, somebody wrote out a comment where they listed what samples they could identify. Some I got, some of them are obvious ones I got, some I didn't know at all. So it was actually pretty interesting to see, even though I don't always try to sample snipe, especially because I got counter sniped. Side story.
Yeah.
I asked Luxury Noise about one of the samples on New Position, and he was like, no, it's actually this. I just changed it to sound like what you think it is. I was like, you motherfucker.
That's amazing. Fucking trolling.
Yeah, it was like trolling. Anyway, sorry. back to Christ. Yeah, just that first half, like much like the FM Forest album, really great conceptual storytelling through this person's journey through the military industrial life of being an American in the aughts and the tens. Like, that's, if you're some disaffected doom scroller, I mean, that's who they prey on.
Yeah.
Right? They give you this some promise of a future.
Kind of want to watch rewatch Generation Kill now. Now that I'm thinking about that. Yeah. You can't. Yeah, I like the first track gave me kind of like, because the organ music, or it sounded like organ music, it kind of like a religious feeling. Like
it's that looped chanting. It comes across as chanting when you loop. Anytime you loop vocals, it comes across a little choral. Yeah, a little chanting. But this album also kind of like Forrest has a hard not a hard transition, but a pretty firm one. Because I was talking about the track Boot Camp, which starts off with like I think like saw wave synth and like these big drum hits every so often, and like bass comes in, but then it shifts in the second half to more upbeat feel. Yeah. But then it just hard cuts to track 6 Trenches, which like the opening 30 seconds of that track, I'm just going to play it as a sample and I'm going to just hard cut to it the same way they do on the album. But when that opening, the like bass and drums come in, it was like impossible every time I listened to the album not to like stank face when you hear it. I loved it. Like it just, something in my little lizard brain was so into the opening of that track, and really the whole track. Just these masterful layers of competing samples. There's like a little bit of sax in there if you really listen towards the end.
Yeah, I do love that. Yeah.
And then like this sort of back and forth between a little more upbeat or a little calmer, and then this like grimy, distorted sound that kind of fades away, that contrast after they've been through boot camp and or have been in the trenches. So like Reed is a really nice kind of smooth echo jam-ish, not quite, but like a lot of looping. And then there's like little choral pads and drum fills every so often. But then starting with track 8, Link Rot, you're back to like gritty, distorted industrial drums.
Yeah, there's this interesting like there's industrial, there's EDM or IDM kind of influences, and then like it gets into this weird like dreamy dream pop or shoegaze kind of like feel. Like it's there's just all these like genres blending together and just shifting back and forth, and you never know what you're going to get. But it kind of gives, I think the overall point is to like, it's music of disassociation. It's like, I think that's the main thing is you're out of your own body. Your mind is not in your own body. Like you're just, you're numb to everything because it's overwhelming. Like someone serving in Iraq would have to deal with all the, or whatever war zone they're in. Like, you go out and see chaos and war and the most evil and horrific things you can imagine, and you come back to base and they have Taco Bell and fucking can put on your headphones and try to forget it happened. Jesus,
that was the problem with First Blood. Rainbow didn't have headphones.
He didn't have headphones, and he didn't have Taco Bell back in the green zone.
You're right. You're right. That's the only difference.
Yep.
It's just, I always think of that movie because it's funny when you have all these little aside, these societal issues of like how we treat our veterans. And you look at something that people have been talking about for like 60 years. But we always pretend like it's some new thing, like, oh, the woke left, blah, 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 blah. It's like, no, man, it's just been a problem forever.
Yeah.
For as long as people have been being bombed and coming back to talk about it. God, it's just.
Yeah. And it's not, and the people complaining about that aren't the people who are like trying to be activists to raise money for veteran services. They just use it as a bludgeon to go after political opponents.
Yeah. But I think the back half of this album maybe captures, at least to me, some of that pain. So that the next track, I'm just going to talk through these in order. Then we can go back and talk about little elements of other ones if you like. But then White Flag, which is more like, I'm just saying grimy. That's kind of the word that pops in my head. Drums, but set against the kind of repeated "What do you want from me?" from Adam Lambert. Very painful. to listen to. Similar to the last one, closer drums spotted, which I was thinking in my head when you were talking about like, plunderphonics is about like hiding your sources.
Not always, though.
You can hide those. Not always, but also those are more hard ones to hide.
Yeah. Yeah, you cannot hide those. Like, yeah.
But then there's like these pained harmonized vocals through the middle, especially in the middle, like a lot of the backing instrumentation drops out. You just have those vocal loops for a bit, and then it comes back. And then at that point, I really feel like going into the end, you have even fewer and fewer like rebounds back to more upbeat stuff. You know, track 11, Don't Look, and then track 12, No Way Back, which is like really ominous, echoing like big drum hits, like more nihilistic vocal samples of like If I Didn't Care being a repeated phrase. It's very dark.
Yeah, more hypnagogic, I think. Like very,
I guess.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
I think of that as being like more of like a peaceful, I think dissociation. I think we talked about dissociation.
Yeah.
I think that's like a better phrase for these last few tracks. And then it ends with track 13, Veteran, which is just a big reverby piano, a little static, a little bit of like ethereal vocals, and then this kind of like long, somber fade out.
Yeah, and that's the only way you get in an album like this is something as sad as you can imagine. Like, like this is either like the veteran leaving a broken shell of a person, or like this is occurrence at Owl Creek's bridge, and they're just like, they're finally bleeding out, and they're fading to black. Like it's something like that. You know what I mean? So there was no other way you get an album like this other than that track. So it's perfect. It works. That
is true. I don't have a lot else to say about it. Just like another example of just really excellent concept and storytelling to repeat I think that's like the key point is I thought that this was like a pretty effective album, and I got a little blindsided by it because I it's like, I didn't know it'd be quite, at least to me, I took it very seriously. Like, and I was like, I saw like the furry soldier on the cover and thought it was going to be more humorous.
Yeah.
And then it's not at all. So props to Christ for, maybe it's a misdirection is my fault.
Well, I mean, it's just the absurdity of existence, the absurdity of being sent out to a war zone,
Yeah.
Catch-22 of the 21st century.
Yeah. Slaughterhouse 6.
Slaughterhouse Yif.
Oh, my God. All right, anybody can have that one for free. I'm not going to do anything with it.
Next album name. Yeah.
So both albums, just really, really great storytelling. Definitely check them out if you haven't already. A little late to the party. I was really impressed by both of them. Thank you so much for listening. Good to be back. Good to be recording, even though I guess as far as the audience is concerned, there is no real gap. But I did miss it because we had to take a few weeks off. So thanks for sticking to the end. Thanks for checking it out. Next episode, we're going to be doing more of a topic episode. We're going to be talking about rescoring films, which is something that has come up in like little 2-minute bursts in other episodes. I've mentioned like Soderbergh's Raiders a lot, but he's done other films. Recently got like a copy of Dante's Inferno, which had recently been re-released and rescored. And just in general, talk about the act of like rescoring old media, creating new media. How do you shift like the meaning or the experience of film through rescoring it? So that'll be a fun one to research over the next few weeks. If you like this episode and you want to hear more, we do have a Patreon, Night Clerk Radio at patreon.com. We have, I don't know, like 40 some bonus episodes now.
Yeah.
Upper 30s, lower 40s in that range. Some other rewards, cool Discord community full of fun people that share all kinds of great music to listen to. You can also find us at Night Clerk Radio pretty much anywhere. Website, Facebook, whatever social media people are using that I've made an account for, I guess, which is, I don't know, like Twitter, Blue Sky, Instagram kind of being the big three. There's a Ross's gross little Facebook.
Yep, it sure is there. It's a thing you can like, and because I have to manually post episodes there, when I remember to post new episodes there, I do it. So
I'm really bad about the Instagram.
Yeah.
Which is a shame because I think there's probably more people there than like Twitter. And I should be on doing things on other sites more, but I'm not. Mm-hmm. And that's okay. Wherever you do choose to consume our content, please take a moment to rate, review, smash that like button, whatever little algorithmic signifier that site has that tells that you like what we do. It's super helpful. And as always, we advocate, the most important thing being word of mouth and building communities. Find people you like being around, share your interests with them. And hopefully one of those interests is music and Night Clerk Radio and vaporwave and all that good stuff. So thank you once again for listening, and we'll catch you next time. Bye.
Bye.